Strange Brew Podcast, Season 1, Episode 339. We have a new defensive coordinator in Green Bay. Hashtag fire Gannon. Hashtag fire the Gannons. Jonathan Ganondorf is going to be the new defensive coordinator in Green Bay, formerly head coach of the Cardinals, formerly DC in Philly. I felt like it was a strong contender. I ultimately felt like we were going to land on Al Harris and or Jimmy Leonhard, and by Saturday morning, it kind of felt like the fervor on Packer Twitter among the beat reporters was that it was basically Jimmy Leonhard's job if he wanted it. Now, he still had a game to coach in on Sunday as the passing game coordinator and defensive backs coach in Denver, and there are different windows where you can interview people that are still in the act of coaching in the playoffs. So the thought was maybe they were going to wait until Denver was done, then they'd interview Leonhard, offer him the job, and if he wanted it, it was his. Well, that changed course on Sunday, and I guess only Matt LaFleur and Russ Ball and Goody can talk to the reason they pulled the trigger on Gannon. My understanding is other teams wanted Jonathan Gannon, and it got to a point where if this is a guy we want, we need to extend an offer. We can't wait for Jimmy Leonhard anymore. That's sort of the Jim Leonhard story in the state of Wisconsin. It feels like we can't wait for this anymore. And they give the offer to Gannon, and he takes it. So former head coach, former DC in Philly, is going to be leading the defense next year. We're going to break all of that down. We'll talk about championship weekend, too. Who's excited for Patriots-Seahawks Part 2 Electric Boogaloo? It is a rematch of Super Bowl 49, the infamous Super Bowl where the Patriots get the interception from Malcolm Butler. How could you not run the ball with Marshawn Lynch? That's how that season ended. So we get a rematch of those two franchises in Super Bowl 60. It was a Blizzard Bowl in Denver and a really entertaining game between the Rams and Seahawks. And you got to tip your cap to Sam Darnold, I guess. We're going to break all of that down. In the NBA, the Bucks-Mavericks game postponed last night. There's a huge winter storm. It is still butt cold here. But there is a massive winter storm blanketing most of the country in the South where they're not used to it. So Denver couldn't even fly into Milwaukee last night. It's the best day Bucks fans have had in a long time. The fact that they postponed that game, one of the best days I've had in the season, really. Bucks lost on Friday. Giannis is hurt again, and it's a calf strain again, and it sounds like it's going to be at least a month. And at this point, I've got a spin zone I'm going to play you. At this point, it is time to steer into the tank because the only hope this team has of being competitive next year is to ride this thing out, get a decent draft pick, figure out what to do at the head coaching position, trade a few guys, a few contracts open up. You have options this offseason to retool. Whether or not Giannis is going to want to be here, I guess we'll find out. But I don't know if there's any other option at this point. They are not going to win a lot of games in the next month or 6 weeks. So you may as well just steer into it at this point. We'll talk a little bit about Badger basketball. Disappointing day at home against USC when they had a 12-point lead with 12 minutes to go. Couldn't hang on, lose by 2. That ends the 5-game winning streak. They've got Minnesota on Wednesday. We'll talk about that too. Let's go.
On the ground, a chance here. Durham to Hardy to first. Hit time! Yes! The Brewers win! Yes!
Here comes Melvin to the 25, to the 20, Gordon 15, 10, 5, touchdown! Wisconsin, record-breaking run.
Morgan, a smash up the middle, fakes it to center. Here comes Gomez, around third, a throw, and the Brewers win.
Here's the snap. He looks, he throws, and complete interception. And there is your Super Bowl dagger.
Booker the drive, gets inside, leads in, knocked away and stolen by Holiday. Phoenix has to foul, and a pinnacle ball throws it down.
Swinging fly ball in the right center. Broxton is there, and they're the champions. They have done it.
It's been a 50-year journey. Wisconsin, we've got a room at the top of the world tonight. The Milwaukee Bucks are NBA champions.
Yeah, welcome in Monday morning. Do you want to start with a This Day in Packer History? You know, let's save it. I want to end the Packer conversation with a really fun bit of audio. This Day in Packer History. As you know, I am obsessed with that Twitter page, although they're starting to put sad stuff up now. Remember when we first discussed it, I said what I love about it is it's a lot of fun highlights, a lot of fun memories. And it's kind of like state media where they're only showing you the good stuff. Well, now they're putting all kinds of stuff up there. They had the 2014 NFC Championship game. I could have done without that graphic, by the way, at the end of the Rams-Seahawks game yesterday. Seahawks' first victory in the NFC Championship game since 2014. Anybody remember that game? No, I have no recollection. But they are normally all good stuff. Well, that hasn't been the case. They had the Super Bowl 32 highlights up there on Saturday. Why would I want to see that Packer history? I still love you. But today, 29 years ago, is the remembrance of the anniversary of Super Bowl 31 and the culmination of the early 90s to mid-90s renaissance with Wolf and Favre and Holmgren and Reggie White. And I have 2 minutes. I found this on, this isn't even on YouTube. It's on the Wisconsin Broadcasting Museum page. Do we have any B93 Morning Show stuff on here? I doubt it. But it is basically full clips of the radio call that day at Super Bowl 31, and that was the year where Larry McCarron joined Max and Jim, and then Max must have been done, or did they do that for 2 years, and then Max retired? I forget. But that's the first year Larry was in the booth with Max and Jim, so we're going to play you some of that beautiful bean footage coming up here in just a moment. But first, let's talk about Jonathan Gannon. How do we feel about Jonathan Gannon as the defensive coordinator in Green Bay? That's the move they make. As I said in the teaser, Saturday morning, Domofsky, Wilde, all of the Packer beat reporters basically were talking as if this was going to be Jimmy Leonhard's job. And we talked about that on Friday, if he wants it. We talked about that on Friday. They interviewed Al Harris. We played the Al Harris clip. And I said Friday, my feeling was I would like to see Al Harris come. He's an ascending assistant coach, the history Packer Hall of Famer. Or I'd like to see Jimmy Leonhard, who has been great as a defensive coordinator at Wisconsin. He has been pretty good every stop he's been as the DC. And there were ties to Matt LaFleur. Before they hired Joe Barry, kind of sounded like that they wanted Jimmy Leonhard, but at that point, Paul Chryst was still the head coach at Wisconsin, and Leonhard was the defensive coordinator. And I think if Leonhard had his pick of any job, whether it be a head coaching job in the NFL or a head coaching job in college or whatever, I think he would have picked, of all of those opportunities, the head coaching job at Wisconsin. That's where he wanted to be. And at that point, with the team still going well and Chryst still doing well to some extent, it felt like whenever Chryst was ready to hang him up, that Leonhard was going to be the logical choice there. So my feeling is that behind the scenes, Leonhard just said, look, I'm going to hold out for the Wisconsin job. That's where I want to be. Great. Thank you for the offer, but that's where I want to be. And that was before they hired Joe Barry. Well, then the year later, Chryst is fired. Leonhard takes over, does fairly well as the interim, but then from the clouds, they hire Luke Fickell, and Leonhard moves on. And then he kind of kicks around. Like we said, he was an advisor to Brett Bielema and Illinois. He kicked around to a couple of NFL and college teams, and then this year he has been the passing game coordinator and the defensive backs coach in Denver. So Denver obviously played yesterday. There are only certain windows where if you are a team that is out of the playoffs and you want to interview a coach and assistant on a team that is in the playoffs, there are only certain windows or days or hours that you can do that. And it just kind of felt like Saturday morning, since they had not made a move, it felt like they were waiting to interview Jim Leonhard. And like I said, basically every Packer beat reporter felt like if they interview him and they want to, and he wants the job, it will be his job. So I texted my buddies on Saturday, made me look like an idiot. Made me look like an ass is what you did, Ed. Made me look like an idiot. I said, I think this sounds like it's Jimmy Leonhard's job if he wants it. And maybe that was true. But then Sunday morning came the news before all the games that Jonathan Gannon is going to be the new defensive coordinator in Green Bay. And as we said in the teaser, it kind of feels like other teams were targeting Gannon. And I'm sure Gannon and his agent were saying, hey, we'd love to be in Green Bay with Micah Parsons and Xavier McKinney and some of the tools you guys have there. But I'm not going to wait. You know, other teams want me. They're going to pay me a nice chunk of change. If you want to hire Jimmy Leonhard, do you want to wait for me to wait for you to interview Jim Leonhard and decide what you want to do there? I'm not going to wait around. So it might have been a situation where the Packers felt like Leonhard might have been a guy we really wanted to talk to, but Gannon is really high on our list, and if he's going to go somewhere else, then we may as well just commit to Jonathan Gannon right now, and that's what they did. No terms, no money, nothing like that, so we still don't know what the LaFleur extension is. At some point, Goody is going to sign an extension. I don't think that is done, or at least not announced, and we don't know what the length is on the Gannon contract. I would guess, though, that the LaFleur extension is 3 years on top of the one he had left. And my guess is Gannon's contract is going to be around that 3-year range as well. And Goody's will be a 3-year tack on. And Rich Bisaccia, I think Bisaccia stays. I can't believe I'm saying that. I know we mentioned that on Friday. Still no movement there. And LaFleur now has had his extension reportedly, allegedly. He's had it since last week, Monday. I think that's what we had that report on. And no movement on Bisaccia, and we talked about the Kuhn subplot and some of the former Packer players who have tweeted out glowing reviews of Rich Bisaccia, despite what the numbers tell you. They have tweeted out how well he's liked in the locker room and the coaching staff. I don't think that's coincidental that is happening. And the fact that we still have no movement there, I do think it's going to be LaFleur. I think it's going to be Gannon. I do believe something is going to change on that offensive coaching staff. A lot of Twitter was making a lot out of the fact that Jeff Hafley, when he went to Miami, did not interview or hire any Packer offensive assistants. And a lot was made of the fact that Matt LaFleur, allegedly, now maybe he did interview some people we just didn't know about, didn't interview anyone on Jeff Hafley's staff or any in-house candidates. So there was some discussion about that. I feel like it's a nothing burger, but I can see where you could maybe create a story there. You could build your own story if you wanted to. What does Jeff Hafley think of the Packer offense if he didn't interview any of the people under LaFleur? And what did Matt LaFleur really think of Jeff Hafley if he didn't interview any of Hafley's assistants? A lot was being made of that, but it does feel like to me at this point, if you didn't make a move from Bisaccia, you're maybe not going to make one. I think they may still move Adam Stenavich back to offensive line, which is where he was before he became the offensive coordinator. I don't know what he does as the offensive coordinator. What does it just say you do here? All I know from Adam Stenavich is he would make comments every other week that Matt LaFleur had to reel back in during his head coach press conference. Like Stenavich, remember what he said heading into the playoffs that Matthew Golden isn't a part of our game plan anymore? There's other mouths to feed. He would always put his foot in his mouth. That's about all I know about what Adam Stenavich did. He'd be a good podcaster. Just putting your foot in your mouth, left and right. The tasty Oxford. But I don't know what he does. And it does sound like maybe they move him back to O-line and maybe they bring in somebody else for the offensive coordinator job. I think Mike McDaniel's still out there. There were reports that maybe he was going to be the OC for John Harbaugh in L.A. for the Chargers. Don't know that that's a done deal. But it does feel like if you were going to fire someone, you're not going to fire Stenavich, they're going to move him. But if you were going to fire someone, it feels like that move would have been made already. So Gannon comes over from Arizona, and we said either on Friday's podcast last week or Monday's, when those two teams played in Arizona this year, Matt LaFleur spoke very glowingly of Jonathan Gannon, both pre- and post-game. So there was a mutual respect there. Gannon was not great as the head coach in Arizona. Do you want the good news or you want the bad news or the bad news? The bad news was Jonathan Gannon was not great in Arizona. In his 3 seasons in Arizona as the head coach, he was 15-36. That was the overall record. They were 3-14 this year. Remember when they hired him? There was a little bit made of how awkward Jonathan Gannon was interacting with players. Like on the day he was hired in Arizona, they put some social media posts up after his introductory press conference of talking to some wide receivers and talking to Kyler Murray, and he just kind of seemed very robotic and uncomfortable. There was some video of him where he was addressing the team. They weren't on Hard Knocks, but a similar situation that was kind of robotic and uncomfortable. So he might be the opposite of Jeff Hafley in terms of personality, engaging with the media, eye contact, charisma. He might not be that guy, which I don't care about. From a sports coverage perspective, as I've said many times, I loved that about Jeff Hafley because it was entertaining to watch his 15-minute press conference every week, and I could always harvest good content from it. That might not be the case with Jonathan Gannon, but who the hell cares about my sportscast? If this is a top 5 defense next year or a top 7 or 8 defense next year, that's all we care about as Packer fans. I don't need him to be engaging and entertaining in the media. I would like that for the purposes of my job, but I don't need that, and he does not seem to be a guy who's going to be super comfortable at the podium the way Hafley was. So that was going viral when he was hired in Arizona. It did not work out in terms of coaching record. It did not work out in terms of churning out good defenses in Arizona either. It is worth mentioning he did not call defensive plays in Arizona. It's not like Matt LaFleur, who was an offensive coordinator, and then he got a head coaching job, and he still calls plays for the Packer offense. Jonathan Gannon was a defensive coordinator, calling defensive plays in Philly, but he did not carry that over in Arizona. He hired his own DC, and that guy made all the calls for the Cardinals. However, when you have a coach that comes from a defensive background, I would hope the overall defense would be better than it was. If you total it up over his 3 years in Arizona, like I said, do you want the bad news or the bad news? The record in Arizona was bad, and over his 3 years in Arizona with the Cardinals, the Cardinal defense in that 3 years cumulatively ranked 3rd last in the NFL. Cool. So that's not going to inspire a lot of confidence. Now, if you want some good news, you go back to his job as the defensive coordinator in Philly before he got the head coaching job in Arizona, and he was so good in Philly, that's why he was a rising assistant, and that's why he was a guy who was targeted as a future head coach. He was excellent in Philadelphia. They had a top 5 defense the year they went to the Super Bowl 57, which is not that long ago, 3 years ago. Well, yeah, 3 years ago. This is Super Bowl 60 now coming up, but 3 years ago, he was the architect of the defense that went to Super Bowl 57. You know, I always wanted to be a fake defensive architect. And it was really good. Top 5, top 2, I think, in yards given up, top 7 in terms of points given up. So when you smash that together, a top 5 defense, and that is why he was a head coaching candidate heading into the 2023 coaching cycle and ended up in Arizona. So if you take the numbers from Arizona, not going to get too fired up, but if you look at the numbers in Philly, you probably will get fired up. He's got that kind of a background, and now we'll see how he does. As I said on the air on the B93 Morning Show, if this works out, it is a great hire. If this doesn't work out, dumb. That's the take. I don't know how much more you can say, because I am starting to be a little more cautious about assistant coach takes. We probably did a podcast after they hired Jeff Hafley. In fact, I said at some point over the weeks here that when they hired Hafley, we all thought, who the hell is Jeff Hafley? We're hiring the head coach from Boston College, and he must have had a good record at Boston College to have that job, right, John? Nope, he was barely 500 at Boston College. And I remember everybody on Packer Twitter, and myself included, on the air, I'm sure, and on the podcast, we all said, oh my God, you're hiring a mediocre college head coach as the defensive coordinator after we just dealt with Joe Barry? And it turns out that Jeff Hafley has a top 5-ish defense in year 1, had a top 5 defense year 2 before Micah got hurt, and they kind of fell apart there and finished, 12th or 13th in the NFL. But really solid defenses his 2 years in Green Bay, and as we went over, the charisma, the engaging side of it, how good he is with the media, all that stuff, that was very surprising when we first read Packers hired Jeff Hafley. I thought, I've never heard of this guy. So we've heard of Jonathan Gannon. That's a step in the right direction. But I am going to stop with the knee-jerk coordinator takes. Always good for a podcast, a sports podcast, to stop with the knee-jerk reactions. But let's just see how this goes. Maybe it's one of those situations, and like I said, the record was bad, the numbers were bad defensively in Arizona, but maybe it's one of those situations where, like a lot of really good defensive coordinators or offensive coordinators, they get the head coaching job then because they were so good as an OC or a DC, and it just doesn't work out. They're just not a head coach. They're a really good coordinator. Some might say Matt LaFleur is that way. But it turns out that they're a really good coordinator, really good play caller, really good defensive schemer, but they're not a very good head coach and not a very good delegator, and maybe a lot of reasons they're not a good head coach. Maybe they're a bit robotic with the players, whatever. And that just fits better as a lead assistant. We will find that out next year because the raw numbers in Arizona and the career record in Arizona are not great, but if they were great, he wouldn't be available. He would keep on as the head coach in Arizona. If the numbers were good and the record was good, he wouldn't be going anywhere. There's a reason he was available. But that's the guy they go with, Jonathan Gannon, the new defensive coordinator in Green Bay. Before we talk about some other Packers stuff and the title games, we do have to talk, too, about another coaching move over the weekend. This one is not official as of yet, I don't think. But it sounds like we're going to get our dream. It sounds like we are going to get Mike McCarthy in Pittsburgh going home to his hometown team, to his hometown market. Remember when the news broke that he interviewed for that job, I said, I need air to breathe. I need SPF 75 if I'm in the sun for 10 consecutive minutes. I need Mike McCarthy to go to Pittsburgh, and I need Aaron Charles Rodgers to be in Pittsburgh for one more year, one last go-round for the two old war horses, reuniting for the first time since Rodgers might have purposely sunk his career in 2018, midway through that year. I need them to come back together. I need that road to be mended, those wounds to be healed, and I need one last run for Rodgers and McCarthy happening in Pittsburgh. I saw this clip of the Paul Rudd Hot Ones. Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers on the Pittsburgh Steelers together in 2026.
Look at us. Hey, look at us.
Look at us. Huh? Who would have thought?
Not me.
Unbelievable.
Look at us. Hey, look at us.
Look at us. Huh? Who would have thought?
Not me.
Please let Rodgers come back. As you would expect, maybe somebody has tried to contact Aaron Rodgers to find out whether or not that this would make him want to come back, or maybe it would make him want to stay away. We don't have any official word as of yet from Aaron Rodgers. That's probably not going to come for a few months, but man, would that be delicious. You figure they've contacted each other, right? They have to have. I don't know how much communication Mac and Rodgers have had since 2018. I do think Rodgers did an interview at some point where he said that they had mended those fences and that there has been a healing there between those two. Not that it was probably as acrimonious as we thought it was in 2018. It just looked really bad, and it felt like that time had come for them to split apart. You figure if Mac's getting that job, there has to be a text exchange, right? There has to be a text exchange since that news between McCarthy and between Rodgers, and someone has to be hinting at something, but I need that. And then, if that happens, and I know I've said many times, I can't quit Aaron Rodgers. I wish I could. I wish I could quit you. I pulled for him when he was playing in New York in year 2. I pulled for him with Pittsburgh whenever they were on TV last year. And I pulled for him on that Sunday Night Football broadcast where they cinched up the AFC North and got a division title and got in the playoffs. I watched him get his ass handed to him by Houston in the wild card round. But if it's McCarthy and Rodgers, if those are the two guys that are collaborating in Pittsburgh, I may for the first time have to buy the full-on NFL ticket. I don't even know what it costs. YouTube TV, I think it costs $400 or $450 at the beginning of the year, and you get access to every game. I've toyed around with that idea as a degenerate gambler. I don't know why I wouldn't, or at least get Red Zone. As somebody that has money on other games that I don't necessarily have access to, seems like it would be a logical move to get NFL ticket. But if we've got Mac and Rodgers and the buddy cop comedy, Mac and Rodgers, in Pittsburgh next year, I'm finally going to have to bite that bullet, I think, and purchase the full-on NFL ticket so I can watch every single one of those games. So that was news over the weekend as well. Title games yesterday. We had the AFC Championship game first up. It was the Patriots and Broncos, not the Denver Broncos, in Denver. Backup quarterback Jarrett Stidham made the start for Denver, obviously, with Bo Nix out for the year, that injury at the end of the divisional round game against Buffalo. So you knew there was an unknown dynamic here. That's why we didn't put any money. We didn't put money on anything over the weekend, both on the podcast and in real life, which is rare for me. I just couldn't get a read on either of these games, especially with the backup quarterback component. But I'll be damned if they don't go down the field. They score a touchdown. Stidham converted on a long bomb inside the 10. Then he throws a touchdown pass. Broncos are up 7-0, and the weather was good at that point. And they had a chance in the second quarter. The Broncos had a chance in the second quarter to go up 10-0. They had the field goal. They were 4th and 1 at the New England 12-yard line or 11-yard line. So we're talking about a 28, 29, maybe 30-yard chip shot field goal. And Sean Payton decides to go for it on 4th and 1. He tries to go for the conversion and, in theory, I guess, keep the drive alive and try to get a touchdown, get up 14-0. Maybe Sean Payton was thinking in that moment, if I can get up 2 touchdowns with my defense, they're on the road, that might be enough to win. I don't not appreciate the aggressiveness. I always appreciate a good aggressive play call. But in that moment, even in the moment before the weather came, before winter is coming, before the Game of Thrones, Remember the North weather came, even in that moment, I thought, boy, backup quarterback, you're up 7-0, vibes are good. You could go up 10-0 right here. We don't know how many points or how many scoring drives Jarrett Stidham is going to lead them on. Stiddy up. We don't know. You have points. You have it. Don't turn down free points. It's like turning down a free mint. Have you ever turned down a mint? If anybody in your crew, when you're out for the night or you're at work, if a coworker offers you a free mint, has anybody ever turned down a mint? First of all, if they offer you a mint, there's probably a reason. Second of all, who doesn't want a little fresher breath? I don't think I've ever turned down a TikTok or a whatever, mint, icebreaker, or whatever those things are. Always accept the mint. Always accept the free points. Those were free points in great weather conditions. It ends up where New England gets the game tied at half, and then in the third quarter it starts to snow. And it didn't look terrible, but it became apparent very quickly this was going to be settling in for a while. Patriots get a field goal mid-third quarter. Then the weather gets even worse. So now you've got a legitimate blizzard. I mean, it's to the point where CBS is having to superimpose the yard lines, if they can find them, on the TV because you can't see anything. Which, by the way, is a really cool innovation for TV broadcasts. I remember back when there were snow games back in the day on 4:3 standard def, where they didn't have that, where you had to kind of guess where they were in terms of yard line. Maybe they'd pop it up on the screen here and there, and you'd kind of have to do the math or figure out in your brain where they're at. I think that's pretty cool that in those big snow games, they can actually superimpose the yard line to where they're supposed to be with a graphic. But then the weather just escalates, and now you've got a backup quarterback who probably wasn't going to score a lot to begin with in 30-mile-an-hour swirling winds, and the snow is pounding down, sticking to the ground. Nobody can hang on to a football. Nobody can get their footing. And they do get in field goal range a couple of times for low to mid 40-yard field goal attempts, but they never had a chance. And then as the weather just continued to deteriorate, you thought, boy, I already thought they should have taken those points back in the second quarter when the weather was good. Now I really feel like they should. Now, I don't know if Sean Payton talked post-game about whether or not they anticipated that kind of weather. I do not think on the broadcast, although Tony Romo's a little burp, burp, burp out there. I don't know what he's doing half the time anymore. It's interesting, the graph of Romo likability over time and Brady likability over time, where I think Brady's really gotten it together. And he was awful year one, but I think he's been really entertaining in year two. Not everybody's going to agree with that because not everybody people just hate Tom Brady. I don't like Tom Brady, but as a broadcaster, I can appreciate the steps he's taken. He's a lot more endearing and a lot more likable in year two than he was in year one. Romo, remember when Romo burst onto the scene? Everybody loved Romo. Oh my God, we love Tony Romo. He's the next John Madden. He's calling plays before they're happening. He's chopping it up. He sounds like he might have had a nip or two of Blackberry Brady before he went on the air. We love this about him. And slowly that has just gone down over time. It's like an inverse graph. But I don't recall Nance and Romo talking when the weather was good about this huge snowstorm that's on the way. So it would be an interesting question to ask Sean Payton, and maybe I'm sure it was asked of him in the postgame. I just haven't watched the whole 20-minute Sean Payton postgame. Shame on me. But it would be interesting to find out if in that moment in the second quarter where the weather was fine and you had a chip shot field goal, did he know that the potential existed for an hour down the road for it to be a blizzard at Mile High Stadium? And if he did know that, why wouldn't you take the points? My guess is that based on his decision, even though he's an aggressive play caller by nature, my guess is that if he had known what was coming in the third quarter and fourth quarter weather-wise, he definitely would have kicked that field goal and taken the points and taken a 10-0 lead. So the Patriots are back in the Super Bowl. Thank God the 7-year drought is over. As I mentioned on the last podcast, when I sent Sportscast off this morning to WTAQ in Green Bay and our buddy Matt, who is a Brewer Patriot fan somehow, I did say, oh man, that nightmare drought is over for you. Must have been a real tough 7 years, harrowing 7 years to not have your team in the Super Bowl after they were basically in the Super Bowl every year for 20 years. It really felt like when Brady left and Belichick left, didn't we all feel like this fan base deserves, and I mean deserves, with all the Super Bowls, the 6 championships, they went to what? Did they go to 3 others or 4? They went to like 9, right? They went to 9 Super Bowls. They won 6, and they were in the AFC title game every year. When Brady and Belichick and that whole thing finally imploded, and Brady went to Tampa and Belichick went to college and the 24-year-old girlfriend, when all that happened, I felt, and a lot of NFL fans did, that fan base deserves at least 15 years of darkness, at least a decade of darkness. They deserve it for how much success they saw, all the parades, all the championships they got to celebrate, and the greatest quarterback of all time and the greatest coach of all time, maybe. And they got all of that for so long, for almost 20 years. They deserve a decade in the darkness, 15, 20 years in the darkness where their team is utter crap for 10 to 15 to 20 years. And they got 7 years. They got off with good behavior. It's like one of those stories you hear where somebody does something really bad and they're sentenced to 30 years and they're out in 4. It's like, how could they be allowed out this early? They can't keep getting away with this. And they're back in the Super Bowl. So I did, when I sent my sportscast on, I said, oh, man, that drought's finally over. That must have been tough for you. He did send me back a couple laughing emojis. So the Patriots are back in 10-7 winners in the snow in Denver on Sunday. Mike Vrabel hopefully will be named Coach of the Year for our 7-1 Vrabel Coach of the Year bet. That hopefully will happen. So I think the NFL honors are the weekend. It's not this coming weekend. Is it the weekend before? I know they film it at a different time, but I think they air it the weekend or the Saturday heading into the Super Bowl. So we won't know that until the 7th of February then. But Vrabel and the Patriots back in the Super Bowl. And then the NFC title game, really entertaining game. As we talked about on Friday, those two teams, the Rams and Seahawks, played 2 wildly entertaining regular season games, both within 3 points. One of them went to overtime. So you kind of knew this was going to be a good game if all things were equal, if everybody was healthy, and both teams were relatively. And that's what happened. Got a back-and-forth game. Sam Darnold was really good. Matthew Stafford was really good. The Rams down 31-27 in the late fourth quarter, 5 minutes to go fourth quarter. They get a 4th and 4 at the Seattle 6-yard line. And I'm telling you, on that last drive, on that drive, it was a 14-play, 84-yard drive. Stafford was spectacular. He was shoveling passes. He was running for first downs, picking up yards with his feet, which is never something he's been good at. He was gritty. He was sharp. He was making all the right reads, all the bailout calls. They get to that 4th and 4, and they just couldn't convert. And you kind of felt like, okay, you got 5 minutes left or 4, whatever it was, minutes left. You've got timeouts. If your defense can get a stop, you can get the ball back, have one last run at this. And that just didn't happen. You have to give credit to the Seahawk offense. You have to give credit to Sam Darnold. You must give credit to Darnold. He made the throws. They picked up a few first downs. The Rams eventually got a stop, but by that point, they had burned their timeouts, and they received a punt inside their 10-yard line with 25 seconds left. They actually got going. They pick up 23 on the first play. They picked up a little bit on that second play, and then eventually Nakua makes that catch at midfield, but doesn't get down out of bounds. He gets down inbounds, and the clock runs out. If he could have caught that and gotten out of bounds, they would have had a chance at a Hail Mary from midfield, which I would have loved to see. Nothing better than one of those kind of Hail Marys that could win the game in a big game like that, and you never know what's going to happen when that ball's tipping around the end zone. But they unfortunately do not get a shot at that. Nakua brought down inbounds. Time runs out, and Seattle is on their way to the Super Bowl. Again, you've got to tip your cap to Sam Darnold. When he left Minnesota and the comfortable underbelly of Kevin O'Connell, I thought, this is not going to work out. He needs to be with a guy like O'Connell, a quarterback whisperer. He pulled the best out of Darnold in Minnesota. Now he's leaving. It's not an offensive mindset in Seattle with Mike McDonald. And I just didn't think it was going to work. I didn't think he was going to continue on that arc of success that he started in Minnesota, but he did. Now, he threw some picks this year, more picks than he threw in Minnesota, but he also threw a ton of touchdowns. And when I was talking on the air on Friday on the HBL morning show, and we talked about that game and who I think is going to win the Rams-Seahawks game, I leaned towards L.A. just because of Stafford versus Darnold. I mean, Stafford's got the resume. Stafford's won a Super Bowl. He's got the career numbers. He's a future Hall of Famer. And Darnold, while he had decent numbers this year and really good numbers in Minnesota last year, remember the end of Minnesota last year, in a big game in Detroit, he made some mistakes. In the playoffs, he got lit up and made some mistakes. And it just feels like that's been a part of his archetype his entire career. He'll put up some numbers, but when the rubber meets the road, when the money's on the table, he'll fumble it, he'll throw a pick, he'll make one big mistake that will cost him. And that's sort of what I was expecting to happen on Sunday, a close game, but Stafford will outplay Darnold, and Darnold, more often than not, will make that one mistake that will cost his team. He didn't make the mistake. He didn't. 3 touchdowns, no picks. Stafford had 3 touchdowns, no picks. But that Seahawk offense was humming. Their defense was good enough against a really good Rams offense with Devontae and Nakua and Stafford and all the weapons and Kyron Williams they have. And they got it done. So we get a Super Bowl 49 rematch. Thank God. In Super Bowl 60. Seahawks and Patriots. And Seahawks open as 4.5-point favorites. I did not expect that kind of a spread. Both teams won 14 games, right, in the regular season. And you get a Drake May versus Sam Darnold matchup in Super Bowl 60. I'll probably get there. Are you getting there? I'll probably get there when we get to the game. I would say right now, and even championship weekend didn't have a lot of juice to me, and I love football, and I watch both the games, but I wouldn't say I was overly revved up yesterday. Like, I can't wait to watch Patriots. I can't wait to watch Drake May versus Jarrett Stidham. And I can't wait to watch Rams Seahawks. I was more looking forward to the NFC Championship game, but I can't say there was a lot of energy behind either of them. And at this present moment on January 26th, I wouldn't say I have a lot of enthusiasm at the moment for a Patriots-Seahawks game, but we'll see once we get closer. We're all going to watch it, right? I mean, we're all going to watch it. But right now, I wouldn't say I'm overly excited about it. But yeah, the Patriots, I was surprised. I thought that would be a 2.5-point spread one way or the other, but the Seahawks get a 4.5-point initial line. Super Bowl 60 on the way, February 8th. And with that, let's play some beautiful Super Bowl audio for you this morning. 29 years ago today, we got Super Bowl 31, the culmination of the resurrection of the franchise in the early 90s with Favre and Sharp at the time and Holmgren and Ron Wolf, and eventually folding in Reggie and Gilbert Brown and Leroy Butler. The culmination, finally getting back to the mountaintop for the first time since Super Bowl II, Patriots and Packers in the Superdome. And we have some radio audio from the Packer Radio Network. Jim and Max and McCarron. We get our first McCasm here on the Andre Rison touchdown. But this was 29 years ago. 29 years ago.
2 wide receivers right. Chimera is the tight end to the right, and back goes Brett to throw. Here they come. He's got time. He's throwing it downfield.
He's got him.
Wide open. It is going to be a touchdown to Andre Rison.
McCaffrey.
Rison takes it across the goal line. They threw it over the middle. A post pattern to Andre Rison, and he had 10 yards on the defender, and the Packers score early.
Look at Brett Favre coming off the field. He is so happy. He started slow for 2 or 3 games, and his first pass goes for about 50 yards.
Change of plays. Brett has had a receiver open twice on changes of plays. This time he's going to go long upfield.
By the way, some of this has like NFL Films music in the background. That wasn't playing in the background of the radio broadcast. There wasn't a house band on the Packer radio now.
Freeman, 50, 45, 40, 35, 30, 25 down the sideline. All the way. A long pass play. Brett Favre again checking out at the line of scrimmage.
Play action fake by Brett. He rolls to the left. He can run in if he wants to. He's going to run to the goal line. He may not have gotten to the end zone.
Yes, touchdown.
Excellent effort by Brett Favre and an excellent effort by Aaron Taylor as well. He got Willie McGinnis cut down on the outside to allow Brett to scamper into that end zone.
Here is a high floater. Boy, this is a nice kickoff. Desmond Howard has to back up. Can't get the run from the goal line to the 5, to the 10, to the 15.
Through a hole to the 20, to the 30, outside to the 40. He may hang on. Midfield touchdown for Desmond Howard. It is either 99 or 100 yards on the touchdown.
Goosebumps. Goosebumps.
A minute going here. Desmond Howard, every time he gets the football, he is some kind of terror.
And here goes Bledsoe back. Here they come. Reggie. They got him again.
Yeah.
Back at the 20. Hello, Reggie.
3 sacks for Reggie.
The Vince Lombardi Trophy is coming home where it started.
Oh, my goodness.
You got to feel great for Mike Holmgren. I'll tell you, he did a heck of a job.
World champion, Green Bay Packers. Look at this celebration.
What a moment. Mike's on the shoulders.
Just listen and savor it, folks. This is a championship team you have in Green Bay now.
Unbelievable. Great audio. Again, I don't know how they cut it up or who cut it up, but shout out to Wisconsin Broadcasting Museum. I've been need to find other stuff in there. I don't know how much more stuff they have, but I was happy to find that. Now, you can find the whole game, by the way, the Madden Summerall, which is also great, but the Madden Summerall game is just sitting on YouTube. I may watch it later today while I'm doing a little treadmill run because it's too goddamn cold to run outside. But to find all those big calls, the Reggie sack, the Howard touchdown, the Favre touchdown, the Freeman touchdown, the Rison touchdown, and then that final call, world champion Green Bay Packers. Love it. Jim and Max and Larry McCarron on the call. 29 years. How in God's name was that 29 years ago? I did put on my Facebook page, my station Facebook page, On Air John Team B93. My mom found a picture, an actual photo album, not sifting through the iPad album or the phone album, but an actual photo album. Hey, by the way, have you ever done this? I've done this. Not recently, but I mean a year or two ago, I think I was looking at a photo album, a picture book for some reason. And you know how in your phone or on an iPad, if you have a picture come up and you want to zoom in, you just spread your fingers on the phone? I have done that with an actual photograph. I thought, wait a minute. That doesn't work in the analog world. This does not work with analog pictures. There is no zooming in. The picture is the picture. It's just interesting how ingrained that becomes in your brain of something you can do to enhance or to zoom in on a picture. That doesn't work with a real picture, Jonathan. But I had a picture up on the station Facebook page of me that day, and I am whiter than white. I mean, I am ghostly pale, sickly pale. My nickname in elementary school was Powder. And I had the BB jersey on when it was fresh. It's beat to hell now, but I had the fresh BB jersey on that I probably got Christmas that year. I had the title towel. Remember the title towel? Where it was kind of like the Steelers' terrible towel, but they just put the Packer logo on it, and we were waving that year. I had the LA gear or LA logo Packer NFC Central Division Champions hat on. Not the plain one we talked about a few weeks ago from the 95 division title, but the 96 one, a little more flashy. We had a Packer helmet that you could sit upside down and dump chips into. I had a Packer icy mug. I mean, just decked out. Not a care in the world. Just couldn't. There was no fiber of my being that day that thought they were going to lose that game, even though it got tight in some moments. Just that's the wonderment of being a kid, and your favorite team is finally there, and it felt like it was a coronation day. I at no point did I think they were going to lose that game. And how much fun that was. My mom, I'm sure, brought out a million different hors d'oeuvres. That is another one of those sports days I'd like to relive. At 12 years old, and just the glory of that moment of seeing that and being that age as it happened. We had that up on the Facebook page today. But yeah, 29 years ago, That was the title day, Super Bowl 31, and that must have been then a couple days later, the return to Titletown, where it was just freezing cold at Lambeau Field, and the team got in late, and what a moment that was, too. But that was This Day in History, 1997. Yeah, thank you, Packer History. Let's get back to just posting good news on Packer History Twitter, shall we? All right, now let's talk about Giannis, and then let's talk about the Badgers before we get out for the day. I think we're going to have to play the spin on Giannis. So first of all, last night's game canceled. Dallas, there is a bunch of snow. As cold as it is here, I guess we consider ourselves fortunate because that's all it is. We had the extreme cold warning on Friday when we were broadcasting. It was terrible on Saturday. All day Saturday, we barely got above zero. Sunday was cold too. Today is cold weather advisory. But we're not getting pounded the way the South is with snow, and they're just not ever prepared for that, nor would they be. Why would they be? There's no infrastructure down there. They have no salt trucks, no plow trucks. So Dallas never got off the ground. The Mavericks team plane never got off the ground and made it to Milwaukee last night. It was supposed to be a 6 p.m. tip time. That got postponed. It sounds like they're going to make it up on February 19th. So that is the Thursday coming out of All-Star Weekend. Now, the bigger news, that was some news, but the bigger news came on Friday. And Friday, the Bucks lost again. They lost again to an undermanned Nuggets team. You know, we talked about all the bad losses this year. The losses to the Wizards. They lost to, who was it? They lost to the Nuggets in Denver where they were down 4 starters. Then they lost to somebody else, the Timberwolves, when they were down 3 starters. So again, on Friday, the Nuggets were down 4 starters, just like they were when they beat the Bucks in Denver. And they were not only down 4 starters, the one starter who was playing, Aaron Gordon, got hurt and did not play in the second half. So by the second half, all 5 starters are unavailable for Denver. Nikola Jokic, the 3-time MVP, all their great players, unavailable. And they are on the second game of a back-to-back. And the Bucks had at least a day off. Maybe, well, was it 1 day off or 2 days off? I think it was 1 day off. But they had a day off on Thursday. So the Bucks, who just lost to this Denver team down 4 starters, had a day of rest, again facing them down 4 starters, eventually down 5 starters. The Nuggets are flying late night, coming in on a back-to-back, and still the Bucks lost that game, 102-100. They were down double digits for most of the game. Bucks made a furious rally late to even make it close. Kyle Kuzma had a look at about a 35-footer to win it, which actually didn't miss by that much. Hit off the front iron. Looked like it was online. That would have been an incredible walk-off winner to rally for that win when they were dead in the water all night. But they lose 102-100. And on top of that, they lose Giannis at the end of that game to another calf strain. So he had the groin injury, then the calf strain, then a break, then another calf strain. And Giannis said in the postgame that he is expecting, now we did not get any results. He was supposed to have an MRI on Saturday. As far as I know, let me go to Eric Names' page here of The Athletic, who does a lot of Bucks coverage. I don't think any results, and maybe because they didn't play last night, that probably would have been the time when Doc would have talked to the media before the game and after the game where they would have found out what the result was from that MRI. But I don't think we got an MRI result at any point. No, we did not. But Giannis talked to the media after the game, and he said that his expectation is going to be that this is going to be the same as it was the first time and the same as it was in 2023 when he went down with that calf strain, that he is likely going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks. So they lose the game. They fall to 18-26. They are a season worst 8 games under 500, and now you're staring down the barrel of not having Giannis for a month and a half. And it's late January now. There's a lot of season left. But if he's out 4 to 6 weeks, let's just say he's even on the low end. Let's say he's out 4 weeks or maybe even 3 weeks. That still brings you back the last week of February. If he is out 4 to 6 weeks, we're talking about a mid-March return. And at that point, there's only 3 weeks left in the year. And you're probably not going to be anywhere near a play-in tournament spot or a playoff spot by that point. So that was the news on Friday as we have yet another Giannis injury. Now, before we hop into the spin zone, I'm not going to acknowledge this right now. This is a non-acknowledgement acknowledgement. Am I concerned? John, are you concerned? You've got mail. Do we have any mail? I haven't actually checked today. Let me just check that. If you were to ask me right now, in addition to all the other stuff going on, how bad the Bucks have been, how they're 8 games under 500, and all the other stuff going on with the Giannis rumors this summer and the Giannis rumors during the year. He's got 1 year left on his deal. Does he want to stay? Does he not want to stay? He says he wants to stay. Then a couple days later, he says, I'll take it day by day. All of the side stories, all of that crap. If you were to ask me, John, throw all that other stuff out, are you concerned that Giannis is becoming injury prone? And I would say, again, this is a non-acknowledgement acknowledgement. I would say that I am getting to a point where I might be a little concerned that Giannis is becoming injury prone. And that was never the case for him until 2020. He got hurt in the bubble. Not a big deal. That was toward the end of that year. And then, of course, he had the horrific knee injury in the 2021 title run year. And he comes back like miraculously, like Lazarus. He comes back a week later and is playing well in the finals and leading the team to a title and scoring 50 points in a clinching game. But he did have that in 2021. 2022 is the last year that he played where he probably had some load management games, but that year he was fully healthy the whole year. He was fully healthy throughout the playoffs. That was 2022. In 23, he hurt his calf in the last week, did not play in the postseason. In 24, he got hurt, I forget when, during the regular season. And he did play in the playoffs a little bit, I think. Or am I getting those years wrong? 23-24, he hurt his calf. 24-25, he got hurt a couple of times during the regular season. Then Dame got hurt in the playoffs, but Giannis did play in the playoffs. And now this year we have another calf injury, and this seems to be the recurring one. The calf injury to end the 23-24 season where he did not play a game in that Pacers series. Hurts it again this year, is out for a couple of weeks, comes back. They have him on a minutes restriction, only 30 minutes a night, and then he hurts it again anyway. So this right calf now, this is the third time he's hurt it. One concern that has always existed with Giannis, and this is year 14 now. He's only 31 years old, but there are a lot of miles on those tires. These are not highway miles on Giannis's tires. One concern that everybody has always had about Giannis is that his style of play, how is it going to age? Because he relies so much on physicality, so much on athleticism, so much on strength and scoring around the rim, and he gets knocked down so many times during the course of the game, and he's got these nagging injuries, and on top of playing the NBA schedule, it seems like every summer at this point he's spending time 2 or 3 or 4 weeks with the Greek national team, and that's maybe another debate for another day, where now when you start to add these miles up, and now as Giannis seems to be becoming more injury-prone, I think most Bucks fans always had a raised eyebrow about all the time he spends with Greece in summer, where you think, God, could you just rest all summer? Could you just take a summer of George? Could you just rest for 3 months or 4 months and come back fully healthy? Do you have to go play? Like the year he didn't play in the playoffs in 23-24 against the Pacers, he played for Greece 2 months later in an international series. And he played in the Olympics. And I know, we all know, it means a lot to him. They won a bronze medal this year in the FIBA Cup or whatever it was. We know it means a lot to him to play it. And because he's a once-in-a-lifetime player, and because he delivered us a title that we never thought we'd see and multiple MVPs, I guess we just say, all right, whatever. That's just the cost of doing business with Giannis. But now that we're getting to a point where he is getting hurt more often, you look back at some of that and say, God, I mean, could you just take one summer off and focus only on the Bucks? Could you? The team that's paying you $250 million, could you just focus on getting healthy and coming back 100% recovered and refreshed heading into a year? So that's another conversation. But if we're going to have the conversation of, are we getting worried that Giannis is now going to get hurt every year, I think it's a legitimate concern. And it's happening a lot more often, and because he's so physical, and because he always attacks the rim and gets knocked down, and teams are so physical with him defensively and punching him and knocking him down and drop kicking him, how is this going to play in the back half of his career? Now, some players that utilize brute strength and athleticism the way Giannis does, they start to fall back on a jump shot or a mid-range jumper or free throws, something like that late in their career. Well, Giannis has gotten better at that, but I wouldn't say that's a real good fallback for Giannis, even though his mid-range jumper last year was excellent. It has not been excellent this year, but you know what I mean? If a physical player starts to get into his early to mid-30s, and these injuries start cropping up, and that player realizes, okay, I've got to stop attacking the basket the way that I do. I've got to tone down the aggressiveness a bit, or I'm just going to be hurt every year. Those players then start to lean into a mid-range game, a three-point game, a free throw game, and that has never been a consistent part of Giannis's arsenal. So now that he is 31 years old, and we've now had 4 of the last 5 years he's dealt with injuries where he hadn't had any of that before, I do think it's becoming a little bit of a concern. But that's maybe a different conversation for a different day. But he is hurt now, and this team is going nowhere. And I think what you have to do now is, as they say in the Navy SEALs, there's a catchphrase in the Navy SEALs that says, embrace the suck. And the Navy SEALs say that, and podcasters say that. Both, you wouldn't think there's any cross-section between the Navy SEALs and the podcasting world, but there is. Embrace the suck. And I think this is the only path forward for the Bucks, and I actually don't think this is a bad thing going forward. Cue my music.
It's time to enter the John Hensler B93 Spin Zone, where unicorns exist and logic need not apply.
Oh, come on, man. Believe in something.
You've been warned.
Okay, so we saw him go down on Friday. Not good. Walked to the locker room in the first quarter, came back, and then you could just tell he was favoring that calf most of the game. And then he really pops it late fourth quarter. He goes to the locker room. He comes back to watch the end of the game. And then he delivers the news we just talked about. He thinks he's going to be out 4 to 6 weeks. I guess we'll find out on Tuesday. That's the next time they're on the floor in Philly. Maybe we'll find out then when he meets with the media and Doc meets with the media what the result of the MRI on Saturday was and if that 4 to 6 week diagnosis is accurate, or maybe it's longer or maybe it's less. But that's what he said at the end of the game. So we got that news Saturday morning. We knew he was hurt. And side note, Doc Rivers in the postgame on Friday, they asked him about Giannis. Doc says, I could see him favoring it the entire game, and I asked the medical team several times about what the situation was. And Giannis was defiant, was his word, Doc's word. Giannis was defiant about staying in the game. So we left him in the game, even though I could tell he was favoring it all game. You know, Doc, if only there was a person that worked for the Bucks that could overrule Giannis when he's clearly hurt and clearly laboring and clearly at risk for a much larger injury. Not just what happened on Friday, but you think about Dame last year, you think about all of the Achilles tears that we've seen in the NBA and the NFL, because that's where it starts. The calf injury is where it starts. So I guess in some ways we should be thankful it's only 4 to 6 weeks. If he ruptures his Achilles, he's done for the year. And he might be done for the year anyway. But that would have been even worse. If only there were somebody that could pull him out of the game and say, we're not doing this, Giannis. Sit down, go to the locker room, do what you have to do. But we're not risking you in this game at this point when we're down by 17 points. If only there was somebody whose job that was. Fire Doc. Hashtag Fire Doc. But I actually believe when I read Saturday morning the Giannis quotes, and I'm going to be out 4 to 6 weeks, initially my feeling was, oh my God, this team just can't catch a break. And then I took a beat, and I thought, this might actually be a good thing. This might actually be a lucky break for this team this year. Because you've got the trade deadline coming up on February 5th. That is next Thursday. And if Giannis is healthy, and this team is 7-8 games under 500, there is going to be the temptation, I would think, for the front office, because you're in this spot where Giannis is entering the last year of his deal, and we have all these rumors about him maybe wanting to go somewhere else, you might force something to happen then at the deadline next Thursday. Now, we've been over. The Bucks have a draft pick this year. They have a first-round pick this year. I don't know that all the fans know that. They do not have a first-round pick in 2027, but the next pick that they fully control, they don't fully control the pick this summer. They have a pick swap with the New Orleans Pelicans, who are also bad. But they have a first-round pick. The next year where they have a first-round pick that they are completely in control of is 2031. And you've seen a lot of Bucks fans, a lot of Bucks reporters talking about what could you use that for to get back at the deadline this year? Can you use that 2031 pick and combo it up with some combination of players and get something of significance back? But here's the thing. None of that would have mattered. This team is bad. They are a bad team. And they are a bad team with Giannis, which seems impossible to say, but they are a bad team. And now with Giannis out, they're going to be even a worse team. But one player next week at the deadline, whether you went and got John Morant, who is also hurt now, whoever you would have gotten, Zach LaVine, whatever player they've been mentioned in trade rumors with, whatever player you would have spent the pick and spent assets getting, what few assets you have left, you would have spent them getting somebody at the deadline next Thursday, and it wouldn't have made a lick of difference. Maybe you end up in the play-in tournament. Maybe you end up somehow getting to the 8 seed or the 7 seed, and you're more than likely out in the first round either way. This team, at best, if fully healthy and Giannis is fully healthy, is a bottom-tier playoff team that is out in the first round. But because you're in this situation with a once-in-a-lifetime player who has 1 year left on his deal, who may or may not want to leave, if Giannis is healthy, you might have looked to the deadline next week and thought, we have to do whatever we can. Whatever draft capital we have in the arsenal, whatever money we have, whatever we have, we need to unload it to try to convince Giannis to stay. Now that he is out for 4 to 6 weeks, and this team is already 8 games under 500 and 2.5 games out of a play-in tournament spot and 6 games out of the 6th seed, which would avoid the play-in tournament, now that you're here, I think you can just try to sell Giannis on a tank year, get out the Panzer tank, call it a Panzer year, get out the tank, embrace the suck, steer into the skid, whatever phrase you want to use, and just lose and tank the rest of the year and try to reconfigure this thing at the end of this season, which was probably the better move anyway. So now, in my mind, if Giannis is out 4 to 6 weeks, they're already 8 games under 500. This is a team that's probably going to barely win 30 games this year. So this is a bad team. Like I said, they have a first-round pick this year. It's a pick swap with New Orleans. New Orleans is also a bad team. New Orleans right now, if the season ended today, the Bucks, I think, would be picking 8th or 9th overall in the draft, and the Pelicans would be picking 2nd or 3rd. So it's a pick swap, which means if the Bucks end up with a higher pick than the Pelicans can trade places. If the Bucks end up with the 4th overall pick in the draft and the Pelicans have the 7th, they can flip spots. But either way, because the Bucks look like they're bad and the Pelicans look really bad, either way, the Bucks are going to have a top 10 pick in the upcoming draft and could have a top 3 pick or top 5 pick and could even have a top 3 pick in some scenarios. So you actually do have a valuable draft pick coming up in June. At the end of this year, Kyle Kuzma's contract becomes an expiring contract heading into next year, which is a valuable asset to trade. You get the mid-level exception back. You get the BAE exception back. There are a lot of ways that you can actually sign players this offseason, trade players this offseason, get a high draft pick, and then maybe you're able to retool the entirety of this roster basically heading into next year. But I think this is the only path toward competitiveness in 2027 or 2026, 2027. And I actually think the Giannis injury frees you up now. You don't have to pretend you're a good team. You don't have to pretend you're a contender. You don't have to say, like I'm sure we've said, oh, we've got Giannis and anything can happen with Giannis. He's the best player in the Eastern Conference. If you have Giannis, you can beat anybody. We've seen so far this year that is not true. Even when Giannis has been healthy, they have barely been winning games or barely been competitive in big games. Outside of maybe the first 5 games of the year where they started the year 4-1. So now the burden of pretending that this is a good team, 8 games under 500 and staring down the barrel of a month and a half without Giannis, where you're maybe only going to win a handful of games, the burden of pretending this is a good team is gone. You can accept the tank. You can accept the fact that you're going to get a really high draft pick in June. And look, in the NBA, I know the draft history for John Horst is not great. The draft history, with the exception of Giannis in the last 15 years, has been really bad. But they've also been drafting mid to late 20s, or they've been trading their picks to get guys like Drew Holiday. So they have not had a top 10 pick, I don't think, since Thon Maker maybe, or Larry Sanders. I mean, we're going back in the day. You do have the chance, if you get it right, which is no guarantee, you do have the chance in a loaded draft this year with a top 10, maybe top 5 pick, to have a player have an immediate impact next year and to put a young, talented player with some major upside next to Giannis, which we have not had in a long time. So I do think, as bummed out as I was with the Giannis injury news on Saturday, seeing him leave the game Friday, then reading about the 4 to 6 weeks on Saturday, I actually do think this is the best path going forward, because now you're going to lose a bunch of games and you no longer have to act like we're only a player away from contending, which you never were anyway. So save what assets you have. Save the money, save the 2031 pick, continue to lose, and the Pelicans continue to lose, and you're going to get a high draft pick. If you hit on that draft pick, you can rework this team in the offseason. The question will be, if you do tank this year And if this team is 15, 17, 18 games under 500 by the time Giannis is healthy in early March, which is a distinct possibility, why would you even throw Giannis back out there? I know Giannis said in the postgame, I'm out 4 to 6 weeks. I'm going to focus on getting healthy and making a run when I get back. This team might be mathematically out of it if he's out 4 to 6 weeks. And at that point, it makes zero sense to put Giannis on the floor and risk any further injury or any more wear on those tires. So the question will be, if you do embrace the suck, if you do embrace the tank, does Giannis see the vision, or does Giannis want out at the end of this year, even though he said in the Athletic article, I want to retire a buck? I guess that doesn't matter at the end of the day. I still think with or without Giannis, whether or not he asks for a trade at the end of this year, I think with or without Giannis heading into next year, the best move for the remainder of this year is to lose as many games as possible, get as high of a draft pick as possible, rework this team, fire Doc, move into the front office, get a young head coach in, get a top 10 pick, top 5 pick, sign a couple of free agents, which they will have room for, trade Kuzma's expiring contract. There are ways to make this team look a lot better and younger in 2026 and 2027. But that is the question. If you do just lose these games, which it looks like they're going to do because they're not good, if you do just lose a bunch of games and you're mathematically out of it and you're tanking by the time Giannis is healthy in March, is Giannis going to want out at that point, or is he willing to see the longer-term vision of retooling this team this summer and maybe having some upward trajectory going into next season and the years after that? I don't know. We don't know what Giannis thinks about that, but regardless, this feels like the best path going forward. Bucks are back on the floor in Philadelphia on Tuesday, and then let's wrap up on Badger basketball. Disappointing game on Sunday. Had a chance to win 6 in a row. At home against USC, they were down most of the first half, grabbed a 2-point halftime lead. Then it felt like they were in control. Had a 12-point lead with 12 minutes left in the game. Went ice cold. Really didn't shoot well. Neither team did for the majority of yesterday's game. I think the Badgers shot 35% for the game, 27% from beyond the arc. And they've been a really good offensive team. That was uncharacteristic. That was the exception to the rule so far this year. But when the offense dried up, they couldn't get the stops, and USC rallied. USC was up by 2. Badgers had the ball under 10 seconds left. Nick Boyd, who had a great game, had 27 points or 29 points on 10 of 17 shooting. He had a runner in the lane that kind of got deflected, and that was the last chance to tie it. USC knocks down a couple of free throws. Badgers fall 73-71. If they would have won that game, they would have been 15-5, 7-2 in the Big Ten, and they would have been in the top 25 today. They're probably not going to be now, even though USC they were 14-5 going into yesterday. They're not a bad team. So the loss isn't the worst in the world, but when you have a 12-point lead at home, you feel like we've got to close that game. And Greg Gard said as much in the postgame. Fire Gard. So the Badgers lose. They fall to 14-6, 6-3 in Big Ten play. They host Minnesota at the Kohl Center on Wednesday. They've got a bunch of winnable games. They've got Minnesota on Wednesday. They've got Ohio State, who's not having a good year, at the Kohl Center on Saturday. But if you could have won that game and finished it, that would have been 6 in a row, and you could have had a real shot at 7, 8, maybe 9 in a row with the way the schedule breaks. But a bummer of a loss on Sunday. They have Minnesota at the Kohl Center on Wednesday. They're our only hope right now. I mean, for any kind of March Madness, Marquette's, that is long gone. And maybe you get UW Milwaukee or UW Green Bay and Doug Gottlieb to come out of the Horizon League, but I doubt that. So this is it. Badger basketball is it. If we are going to wander through the darkness here after the Super Bowl and the Bucks are tanking and Giannis isn't playing and the Brewers don't start for another 2 months, all we have is Badger basketball. Help us, Greg Gard. You're our only hope. That is our only hope for anything entertaining here from now to the Super Bowl and then post-Super Bowl all the way through the beginning of March. Pitchers and catchers report in 14 days, by the way. That'll do it for us here on your Monday morning. We'll get back after it Friday. We will take a look at what happened with the Bucks this week, the Badgers this week. They might be a lighter podcast now in terms of length starting on Friday. We'll still get you 2 a week, but there's just not as much stuff going on. Maybe the Packers make a move with Rich Bisaccia, or maybe there are more coaching moves made by the end of the week. If that happens, we'll break that down on Friday as well. Have a happy, safe work week. We'll chat with you then.